1996 it started. And the OEMs went to Congress, or to the government, and said, listen, we have a problem. We got people that are servicing our equipment, we don't like that. And so they said, you know, we're losing market share. Well, the FDA said, wham, move on, not my problem. So, interesting enough, about the sixes, I don't get it, but 2006, they did it again. They came back and they said, listen, we got a problem. We got people servicing our medical equipment and they're cutting into our profit margin, they're cutting into our money. Government said, wham. Fortunately, there were a bunch of people that were very active in the industry that went back and got a bunch of data and showed them that it's not relevant, it's not a big deal. But here's where it gets ugly. 2016 in February, some of you may know, they came back and they finally got their stuff together. They got a whole bunch of lawyers and they said, we got to figure out a way to do this. And they said, guess what? People are dying because non-OEMs are servicing medical equipment. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. You guys know how that works, right? If you make an accusation, it's guilty till you can prove yourself innocent. Unfortunately, that's the way this in our world works. And so the FDA goes, wow, we better look into this. So in February 2016, they asked people to come in and comment on papers, give us some feedback. A lot of people commented. And so it just stirred up more questions. It really didn't solve anything. And so we're going to walk through a little bit around where we're at. So what ended up happening is Congress held a meeting, and they have what they call a MDUFA bill. And so they went in, and it was this huge, I don't know, 1,000 some odd pages. They had all kinds of information, all kinds of things that were going to happen. There was this one little paragraph that said, we need to pass a law that says you can only work on medical equipment in healthcare facilities if you are an employee of the manufacturer. And there's a gentleman named Rob Kerwin who works for IMERS. Anybody familiar with IMERS? Okay. IMERS is an organization which basically is comprised primarily of imaging organizations. So the smaller ISO third-party imaging organizations, they all belong to IMERS. Rob Kerwin is their attorney. He happened to be in Congress at the time when this MDUFA bill was being reviewed, passed, and he objected. And fortunately for us, that's basically gotten us to where we are, because if that had passed, we'd be in a whole different world right now. So from that, Congress said, you know, Rob stood up and said, wait a minute, it's not as it's professed. There are really good people that work in this industry. There are good work that's being done besides non-OEMs. You shouldn't pass this thing. And so they said, all right, well, we don't know what. The issue, quite frankly, is what does Congress know about what we do? And in candor, from a service perspective, well, I'll get into it in a second. But anyways, Congress said, let's give it to the FDA. Let them go figure it out. Because what does the FDA do, right? So people are probably familiar with the 510K submissions, right? FDA has responsibility to determine whether or not a device that's going to be put into the healthcare marketplace is going to do what they say it's going to do. So there's a huge, arduous task that you have to go through as a manufacturer to make sure that the medical equipment that you're about to put into the industry is going to work the way you say it does. And you have to make sure that you use that as a correlation to something that's like it to validate that it'll do and reproduce the same results. I actually did that for hematology analyzers from a company I was there in Switzerland for a few years. It's a pretty arduous task. But if you go through it, that's how it works. So Congress said to the FDA, I need you guys to go figure out whether or not there's any validity to what the OEMs are claiming. So FDA, this is their mission and their vision. And I'm not going to read all this, but if you go through it, essentially what it says is we have a right and an obligation to make sure that when patients have access to good quality health care and they have access to good medical equipment. So they felt like, yes, we'll own this, even though in candor, that's not really ever been their responsibility before. So it became a little bit of a challenge because they really didn't understand what we do or how we do it. They'll admit that to you, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do to take their 510K aspect and turn it on its side a little bit to figure out how do we make a change so that we can validate that there isn't an issue here and that people aren't dying and there isn't, you know, something else going on. So first thing they did was they asked the people to give feedback. Tell us what you think. Is there a problem? So did anybody participate in that process? Right? Okay, excellent. So there were 7 particularly words, and I can never remember all of them, but essentially it was define for us what service means, define for us what refurbish means, define for us what update. I don't remember all the words. Chris, do you remember any of the other words?
It's remanufacturing and service, really. That's the
right, those are the 2 biggest ones.
Yeah.
Anyways, a lot of people responded and gave feedback, and as you can see, you can probably see some of the names, and you can probably figure out, guess who was the one that gave these feedback, right? Like, low quality and unsafe servicing exists. Well, I guess I wondered who wrote that, OEMs. By the way, are there any OEMs in the room? Come on, you can raise your hands. I really hope there were. Normally there never is. But I really would love to get, their perspective on occasions, because at the end of the day, we're gonna have to get through this. It's not gonna go away. I can promise you this time, it's not gonna go away. Something's gonna happen, and there's a lot of activity. MITA, everybody familiar with MITA, M-I-T-A? All right, MITA is an organization that represents manufacturers, again, primarily in imaging, but represents about 140 manufacturers around the world, and they're spending on average about $500,000 a quarter to fight this with lobbyists in Washington, D.C. This is not going away. This is big dollars. I don't know if you guys have heard it, but in this industry alone, just in what we do, it's about $11 billion industry. It's not something that's just going to go away. There's way too much money at stake here. It's worth $500,000 a quarter to try to save it for themselves, and that's what's going on. So here's what happened next. Anybody participate in this? Went to Washington, D.C., October 2016, Chris. This was a great experience. Those of us that went, it was really, I don't know that I'll ever see it again in my lifetime. I literally put this together like this because it's true. So it was a huge, huge room, probably 4 times the size of this. And on one side of the room, which was the right side, so if I'm standing here, it's this side of the room. I'm not kidding you when I tell you, there were 3-piece suits, $1,000, $1,200, $1,500, $2,000 suits, the leather satchels, reams and pounds of paper, all representing the OEM. And I mean, these guys were just polished beyond belief. On the other side, we had Navy jackets, no ties, and completely non-collaborative. And so for 2 days, literally there were 400 people in this room, and there were another several hundred that were scattered throughout the building with teleprompts and monitors that could listen in but couldn't be in the room. And for 2 days, there was 2 microphones in the center corner here, and people were allowed to present their perspective. And up at the front of the room, there was a big thing with the FDA people and some hospital associations and some big organizations, OEMs and others. And so we just kept presenting back again from different perspectives. But the one thing that came out of it was 4 pictures, literally 4 pictures, where they would show a piece of medical equipment that was obviously not repaired properly. I'm trying to use my words here very carefully because the imagery that the OEMs were trying to prove was that non-OEMs service this equipment and they did it in an inappropriate manner, potentially causing someone's death or injury. Literally, there was a wood screw and an anesthesia device. There was some duct tape on another one. I can't remember what the other 2 were. Here's the problem. From my perspective, and this is my perspective, let's be clear. First of all, in all candor, we can't even prove who actually did the servicing. Can't honestly say that it wasn't a staged picture. But at the end of the day, in my perspective, if in fact the best that they could come up with from however many years this industry's been around, which is somewhere between the 50s and 60s, 4 instances, I would say there really is a big-ass problem, excuse my French. And I'm also going to say, and I don't mean this to sound the wrong way, but it's very conceivable that in the middle of a surgery case where a patient's on a table and there's a problem, if I got to use a wood screw to get that patient through that case, I might do that. Now, then I said that. But at the end of the day, that's what our job is, to do whatever it takes to get the physician, the clinician, and the patient through the situation. Am I wrong? So, I mean, again, we don't know the circumstances, but they painted this really awful picture that we are all terrible people, we're killing people every day, and we shouldn't be allowed to exist. Unless, of course, you want to collect a paycheck from them, and then it's fine. We all know, and I know this to be a fact, I've been in this industry for 35 years, and I've had a lot of people that I've worked with. We all know that every day, every one of us have the ability to be good or not so good. And a lot of it has to do with what happened at our house that morning. Do we have a problem with the kids? Do we run into getting a car accident on the way in? There's a lot of things that have an impact on our success and how much quality we're going to put into what we do every day. Every one of us have the ability to be really good or not so good. We have that choice. Our paycheck and where our paycheck comes from doesn't necessarily drive that. That's my perspective. Anyways, it was an interesting experience and one that I'm sure will probably never be reproduced. phenomenal thing for us. I refer to this as they've given us an olive branch. As I said to you, there were 7 words that they asked us to find, but at the end of the day, it really boiled down to these 2 words. And so what ended up happening was the OEMs have said that servicing by non-OEMs is causing people to die, and it's giving less than quality service. So the FDA said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to define these 2 terms, and that's what they've done. And they have said, which I believe, and this is me personally feeling this way, that they've given us the ability to segregate and start to dive into reality. If it's servicing, which is candidly what every single person in this room does every day, you service medical equipment. There's a few of us that may remanufacture, but I don't think too many. But at the end of the day, if you remanufacture a device, and the definition is as you see it here, which is pretty specific, you really have to be remanufacturing to be remanufacturing. But if you are, then you're in a separate category. And candidly, the FDA today is not addressing it. They just said, we're going to carve it out, we're going to separate it, we're going to define it for what it is, and if you do that, you may be doing things that we need to look at differently down the road. But servicing, which is really what every one of us do every day, we're good at that. And now we got to figure out what does that look like. And so from this, the FDA, here comes another member of the group that participates in add value, Mr. Busticker. Mike is also a guy that's part of the group that we're dealing with and contributing significantly to everything we're talking about here. So, what happened next? So once we got to the point where we were able to define the difference between service and remanufacturing, and again, you will not hear remanufacturing again out of me because it hasn't been addressed, they've carved it out, and they've said that it's separate and distinct from what we've been discussing. So if you're doing remanufacturing, we can have a conversation afterwards, but it's not really relevant to what we're doing. The rest of it is all around servicing. So the FDA says, look, servicing is what we're talking about. We cannot prove, validate, confirm, or deny otherwise that in fact there are issues or things that we need to address in terms of level of quality as it relates to services. So what we need to do is we need to find out how are we going to do that? What's that going to look like? So the next thing they did was they called, there were 100 of us that went to Washington. Anybody else participate in that when we went to Washington, Chris? So 100 of us went to Washington. It was really an interesting thing. And these 2 pictures, I think, accurately represent it. So they literally got 10 of us to sit around a table, and they did the best they could in terms of making sure that there was an OEM, an ISO, an in-house program, whatever it was, so we had a good mix. There were 10 tables of 10 each. And for the first day, they gave us scenarios around the servicing opportunity. And they asked us to go through the process, describe how you would do it, and how you, in the role that you were representing in that seat, how that would impact you or what that would look like. Well, I got to tell you something. I'll ask Chris to speak to it. It was a really interesting experience because it forced us to put ourselves in the other person's shoes in a legitimate situation and have to hear things that you might have known or you might have thought you known, but you really didn't know. And I thought it was a great experience. And so at the end of the day, we had to report out. And it was a really, really eye-opener for me. But I don't know that it changed anything, but it did give us a perspective that I don't think we had before. So the second day we come back, and there was a U-shaped table at the front of the room. There was 25 of us sitting at the table. They took 25 of us of the 100, and they put us up in the front of the room. And as representatives, again, of like Amy was at the table, the ISOs were at the table, the OEMs were at the table. They tried to equal representation of the 25. And the other 75 in the room, for the remainder of the day, which was almost 8 hours, asked questions. Asked questions of us at the top of the table to say, well, what does this look like to you? What does that mean to you? How does that feel? What does that look like? And it was also being telecast and broadcast, and anybody that wanted to participate. But I think it was a good experience, and a lot of stuff came out of it. But at the end of the day, even to this day, we don't have resolution. We still don't have a solution. We still don't have defined definition. But what came out of this was they said, look, the 25 of you at the front of this table, you're going to become the collaborative community. And remember, they started out as we were going to be a collaborative community. We're not there anymore. But officially, we started out as a collaborative community. And they asked us to have 5 representatives, or to get representation across the board. And we started out with, we had OEMs, represented through Mitre, but we had individual OEMs as well. We didn't have much in the line of patient advocacy. We did have independent service organizations. A term that I believe came out of this, if I'm wrong, let me know, but HDO I don't think existed before we actually created this group. So HDO, anybody that doesn't know what that stands for, Healthcare Delivery Organizations, those of you that work in the hospital, for the hospital, you're now an HDO. Used to be we just had ISOs, but now we have HDOs. Yeah.
Dave, on the manufacturer side, just for folks in the room, so you have MITA, which is the Medical Imaging Technology Alliance, and then there's another group, and I want to make sure folks know who they are, ADVAMed, Advanced Medical Technology Association. And her name was Tara. Remember that day? Woo. But I just want folks to understand who's in there, because it's important that you understand who the enemy is, and they truly are an enemy of HDOs and ISOs, and they do not want you servicing medical devices. But that was an experience. Yes?
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. So, yes. So we have, from that meeting in December in Washington, they decided that we would create a collaborative community, starting out with 25 people. And what they wanted to do is we actually, I don't remember where I go from here, but essentially what ends up happening is they asked for the 5 groups to have 5 representatives each to make up 25. So started putting this whole thing together, and we started figuring out who was going to be there, what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, and going from there. I'm gonna speed through some of this stuff in terms of, so the report and the conclusions basically were that the FDA felt like there were 4 major areas that we should be focused on, right? And so they gave us the remanufacturing, not servicing. We talked about cybersecurity, which, by the way, we've decided since then that there's so much activity in cybersecurity, and it's so massive in terms of how many different directions it can go and what it looks like, that, it was actually, I think, like you and I that figured out that we should just let's make it a separate thing. And so we've got individuals on the 25 group that participate in this that also play in the cybersecurity space and just report back to us. But we took it out as a specific thing that we were going to address. There's just a lot. Like I said, there's 3 or 4 things that I want to go through. I change this up every time because things keep changing. Okay, so my question, first of all, to everybody in this room: have you guys noticed any difference? Have you seen anything that's changed? Are you having more or less difficulty in terms of getting parts, service training, getting availability? I realize COVID is a whole separate issue. That's created another layer of complications. But in addition, since all this has started since February 2016, have you guys seen any change in your world? Thoughts, comments, anybody?
No. I have an OEM who is now making it so rough on us that usually when we do have them do PMs on our CTs, we have them come in on the weekend, so we do 6 drug patients.
With our IT and our executives, we go back to the table and say, we don't buy your equipment, sorry. We go back to the customer and say, we're going to have to find something else, because the vendor is not willing to work with us to make sure that the mitigations that are needed for our system meet the needs of the organization.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
And that's the hammer, right? Andrew's using the right hammer to use on the manufacturers, because that's the only thing they understand is the money. And to have the support of your organization is so important today in servicing of medical equipment. Making sure that your administrators are sitting side by side with you and understand the ramifications and the costs associated with that, and the ability to say, hey, you know what, we're not going to buy.
Yes, sir.
So, they're standing pat. We work for a defense health agency, and we're constantly trying to do cybersecurity for the whole entire DoD network. And we have vendors that will flat out tell us, we're one of the bigger players in the marketplace, and they say, you're just not a percentage anymore. We're not putting the time towards you or anyone else. We're going to hold fast, and we're having to walk away from deals because of it.
Yeah, I can't stress it enough. This is not a joke. And the thing of it is, from an OEM perspective, they have the collaboration amongst themselves. They have the clout, they have the money, they have the education, the support, and they're working collaboratively together to thwart us off and to make us do things differently. The only thing that we've got is staying informed, staying educated, and trying to become active in your capital planning committee as well as just in other things so that you can help inform them so they can make good decisions. And I would just tell you that one of the biggest things you guys can do to add value is to make sure that before somebody bottom line to get a piece of equipment, to make sure that you look at the total life cycle management of the device so that you know that we're going to sign up. They're going to continue to support you as the owner of the equipment to be able to support that device. You coming over to Jewel, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna make this a standard. All right, so I wanted to say this, one of the things that I have found that helps delineates a lot of that is, number one, the clinical engineer in our HCM department has to handle all of the service contracts. You have to. It's not just you have a stake in some department doing one and they just ask your advice. No, you control that contract. Number two, standardization. And let them know, hey, I'm willing to do a partnership agreement with you so that we can be collaborative. You're not willing to do a partnership agreement, we'll standardize with someone else. You are not the only one in this industry that can do what you do. And just hold them accountable to that. If you don't want to do what we need you to do, then you can get ghosted. That's a lie.
That's all you have. That's all you have. I mean, at the end of the day, all I can tell you is that as I sit across the table, my response is I want you to put it in writing that so long as this hospital owns that device, you're going to support my people in servicing it, or we're not buying it. Period. The end. It's going to get to the point, unfortunately, I think what might happen is it gets to the point where eventually everybody says, well, I'm not going to sell it to you, but right now we don't have that problem yet. And hopefully, as you're about to learn, there's some of us working on your behalf, but need your support to try to fight it anyways. So that's what we're working on. So these are the groups currently that make up the 5 categories to get to the 25 people. Some of the seats in each one of these things are empty. These are the actual individuals today that participate on a monthly basis. We have a call every month. There's all kinds of activities going on, and I'm going to share with you in a second. But these are the actual people that make up these 5 categories and the people that are sitting there. As you can see, we're missing some on the patient advocacy, missing one in the affiliate associate groups, and then we have plenty extra in some of the others. But y'all can get involved. You need to get involved. Or at least talk to somebody that's part of it to do, to at least understand what's going on. Really quickly, I'm a guy that likes to learn from pictures. And so when we got together at Amy for that meeting, I asked Amy to actually to draw the pictures of what we did every day. I can share this with these. All my things I think go out on you guys send them so you can get all access to all this. But you can see this is what we did, how we did it, and this is how I like to tell the story about what's going on. But you guys can use this to go back to your staff, get them educated, let them know what's going on. So some stuff that's happening, right? So we've got 2 representatives that are working on our behalf, so that's a good thing. Get active with your local communities, do what you can do there. Some other things that are happening, or at least this is my perspective. I want to share you guys. This is what I try to tell everybody all the time. This is what I believe could happen. Don't know that it could ever happen. But if we truly come together like the OEMs do, I think we can solve this problem pretty damn quick. This is my thought process. So here's the areas that we need to make sure that we're focused on. That we take away their arrows and their quivers, if in fact we can address these things, right? If we had access and we could do all these things, we could be, nothing could question as to where we're at. What do they want? They want 100% ownership of all their equipment and all the servicing and maintaining and PMing of everything they do. Of course they do. So don't we? That's what we want. Neither one of us are ever going to get that, I hope. More likely going to be somewhere in between. Here's what I say. I honestly believe in my heart, if we could go back to every healthcare institution in this country and get them to buy a PM-only contract, and we went back to the manufacturer and said, okay, I bought that PM contract that you want me to get. Now I expect you to get it done on time, in accordance to your manual, and I'm going to be videotaping you in the process. I guarantee you within 6 months they would be begging us to sit at the table and have another conversation. Guaranteed. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll ever happen. Because we don't have, I guarantee you MITA and the OEMs could pull something like this off. They could come back to their constituents and say, here's what I need you to do, and they would get it done. We don't have that collaborative effort. And it's going to hurt us. It's going problem. We're doing the best we can with what we got, but 25 people at this point, trying to represent 50,000 in this industry, with really no money, fighting against 140 organizations spending $500,000 a quarter, sitting with Congress people, is a big. So what happens? Abiomed, Mida, and Phillips, they removed themselves through the process. They were involved with us for a year and a half. For a year and a half, without exaggeration, and I'll ask Mike or Chris to comment, literally, Abiomed pushed back on every single thing that we proposed or wanted to do. They literally tied us up for probably 9 months on a word as we were trying to get into our charter. After 18 months, they removed themselves from the process, and the reason for leaving that they put in writing was because we couldn't move fast enough as a group. And they're the ones that caused the entire pain. Am I off base, guys? That's how sad it was. But now they're out. We're going forward anyways, and there's some great stuff going on. Right now, there's 5 subgroups that are actively working on what's going on. There's a training one, which I'm going to show you a draft that we've got out that you all should look at. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create, the whole premise here is we're trying to demonstrate that we have safe, quality servicing from people that aren't working for the OEM. And the way we're doing that is through subcommittees, through this greater committee that we're going to propose back to the FDA that says, see, it's not as bad as they're making it out to be. It's not even anywhere near close to what they're doing. So we have one that we put together a training doc. So I'm going to show you that in a couple minutes. There's an education, and we have that one I'll show you. Key performance indicators, that's actually mine. And what we're trying to do there is, and Mike is being extremely paramount helpful in that, is we're actually coming up with key performance indicators that we will be able to use by, we have 6 groups right now, 6 organizations that are pulling all of their maintenance for the last 12 months in one big pile of soup. We can't tell who came from what, but we're going to demonstrate that we are hitting all cylinders, that we're doing a good job. We're going to create benchmarks, thresholds, some standard deviation. We're going to go back and present it to the FDA and say, here's what we believe can demonstrate it. Are the OEMs willing to share their information and prove that they're falling within those categories as well? I think it's going to be great. We're a long ways down the road, but we got a little bit more to go, but I'm really excited about that one. My belief is we take away their argument if we can demonstrate and create something that everybody agrees is at least a stick that you can measure against. So that's what we're working towards. Quality management system, I think this is going to be another great one for all of us. How many people, you're mostly what? In-house? How many in-house? Okay, and how ISOs, I guess, would be the rest. So, what else is there? In any event, initially there was this thing that was the FDA said, we're just going to become 1345. Anybody that wants to prove that their quality and safety is good, you're also going to become 1345. One of the things that I really appreciate about the FDA and I really enjoy is the fact that they're smart enough to know that to mandate any one particular product is really not a good idea. Because in fact, what they do realize is it endorses one product. And they don't want to do that. So I appreciate that they understand that. And so they said, no, we're not going to, we may or may not become 1345, but we're not going to mandate that you do. You have the flexibility, just like you do with Joint Commission and CMS. We set up guidelines, we have certain targets that you have to meet, but how you do that is your prerogative. And that's one of the things I appreciate about the FDA. They're also saying the same thing. They're saying that 1345 is a good tool, but we also understand that it's pretty constrained, it's pretty expensive, and not everybody can do it. But you do have to, or what they'd like you to do is show tenets of a quality management system. And so what we're trying to do as this group, and it's being led by Scott Trevino with Trimedics, he's actually taking 1345, 9001, that was the other one, 420, all these different groups, pulling them all together, trying to figure out what's important, and they're creating the tenets of what a good QMS system looks like, which would be a tool that you'll be able to use to go back to your hospital and implement things without actually having to pay or get through an audit process and still be able to demonstrate that you're doing a good thing. That's going to be hugely valuable as well. That's going to be great, and it's a good program that's going on. The last one is recruitment. As I showed you, we're a little short in terms of getting 5 people at each one, and so we have an official situation going on where we're trying to get each one of these 5 groups to have all the people. Were you going to say something, Chris? Yes, sir.
So do you consider it a win that some of these organizations dropped out, or is it just, I mean, like Phillips, why did Phillips drop out? I mean, is it so that we're like turning the tide, or is it, do you
So,
read anything into it?
I'm going to try to answer this thing and try to be as politically incorrect as possible. So my answer is I think they pulled out because we were turning the tide and that we were showing that things aren't anywhere near what they thought they were and causing the issues they had. And so they pulled out because they realized that, I believe initially when they came to this and they felt like this was just going to be a rollover. 2-3 months they would show us that, that they had everything that they needed and that we were just going to roll over and die and just go away. And when we said no, we stuck our feet in the sand, we weren't going to give up. And they tried it for 18 months. I think they figured, well, we'll go about it a different way. And I'm telling you, that $500,000 a quarter that they're spending, they are meeting with Congress. They are actually doing things that are having, it's hurting us. So they're just going about it a different way. And that we don't have as much access to it, and it's becoming harder to fight. So it's kind of a win, but it's kind of a loss at the same time. Do you guys have thoughts?
Hey, Dave, I just want to remind folks on the quality management system. So, we all have, hopefully, we all have some type of a quality system that we're following for the maintenance of our medical equipment. If you go back, MD Publishing, a couple of MD Expos ago, I did a presentation and Blake Collins did a presentation, a little bit more granularity. But I went through a joint commission, we're a joint commission surveyed, and put it side by side with ISO 13485 and demonstrated that everything that we're doing on the Joint Commission side and CMS compliance side can correlate to ISO 13485. And Blake went on the next day on another presentation, very similar but a little bit more granularity. So if you want to go back to the MD Publishing website, TechNation website, you'll find those former presentations recorded or even the slide presentations on there. It might be a good review for you just so that you can also, you have to start thinking like that. You have to start thinking about quality management systems because the OEMs are coming at us saying that the FDA requires them to adhere to the former good manufacturing practices and today ISO 13485 practices. So it's important that you start thinking like that and you start equating your quality program to an ISO standard like 9001 or 1345.
That's correct. Thank you, Chris. That's right. And yes, that's exactly right. So, a couple things we've ratified the charter. As a matter of fact, we now actually have 2 months now to go and revisit the charter and make sure everything's good with it again. We're continuing with the subgroups. Everything's pretty cool. Here's something. How many people know about this? How many people deal with MAUD and the reporting thing? So, did you know about this?
Yes.
So this is an FDA attempt, which I will share with you that most of us in the group aren't necessarily totally thrilled with it because of what they've done and how they've done it. But there's a mandate now through the Safe Medical Device Act and everything else through the MAUD that you now have to, this number 8 is new. Was this device serviced by a third-party servicer? My question is what does that mean? Does that mean if you're an in-house employee, are you a third-party servicer? Because you're not the OEM. So there's some real uncertainty and unclarity, and it's actually created more questions than I think answers. And we've worked with the FDA. We've provided them through that group, through the collaborative, or through the community. We've given them feedback and told them that this is going to create more problems. But they said they're going to listen, but I don't know that we'll see any change. But if you're not aware of it, you should be, and you need to make sure you do it.
So Dave, I got a question. So if you're a GE or a Philips working in-house at a facility, are you a third-party servicer or you're a manufacturer? You're a third-party servicer, folks. So the ironic thing about this is you have some of these very large manufacturers that are playing in the same space that we're playing and fighting us, and they're in the same space. So, they're a third party.
Yeah, so in particular, GE and Philips, not so much Siemens because they don't do it themselves, but Philips and GE in particular they go into hospitals, they take over biomed departments, and they service other people's equipment. So part of them are shooting themselves in the foot, but that's what happens when you're so big that you don't even know what your brother's doing in your own house. I mean, but that's been your problem forever. Yeah, it's kind of a whole joke in some respects. So I told you about the two, the senator and the representative and some of the stuff that they're doing. There's right now 17 states in this country that are actually in court fighting the right to repair issues that are going on. there's a chance that you may get a phone call. There's several lawyers, I've gotten several calls from lawyers in different states asking me to speak on behalf of the non-OEMs so they continue to fight on our behalf. If you get that chance, do it. If you're looking for support, call me, call somebody else, we'll help you out wherever we can. Here's an interesting one. How many people know about this? So our infamous surgical robot organization is actually being sued because of their inability to be flexible and work with us. So we have some things going in our favor, but we just don't have a lot of support or money to continue to do what we're doing. So, and then the last thing, as far as I'm concerned, as you guys are all aware, as complicated as this is, you lay around a thing called, I've been preaching for 3 years that we're going to have a problem with a shortage in FTEs. And if you look at John's awesome new website they just put together in terms of HCMs, that thing is growing every day. I guarantee you guys are having trouble finding people. And then finding good people on top of that. It's gonna get really, really bad, really fast. And honestly, the only way we're gonna solve it somewhat is to steal from each other, and that's gonna become even a bigger problem. We're gonna be fighting amongst ourselves. We've gotta do something different. If you continue to try to solve your problems the way you have been with resources and service delivery strategies, the way you've been doing it for the last 30 years, probably gonna put yourself out of business pretty quick. That's just my 2 cents. I'm gonna share with you real quick. I told you that we put together two of those subcommittees that we got working. This was great. Sam Jakes out of McLaren up in Michigan. She and her team put this thing together, and it's an internal document. I'm gonna share with you guys, put it available to you, but it's really so that we can teach each other who we are and what we do. It's really pretty informative. It's very long, it's 50 some odd slides, and I'm gonna zip through it, but you can see this is kind of like, this is what we try to achieve. You can see what the mission was. But you'll see there's your 5 categories that we talked about. And then we start actually defining. And again, when we first started this group, amongst ourselves, we couldn't agree on what we were, who we are, and what we're doing. So we tried to come up with something that would make it very clear and put us all on the same page. That in itself is paramount. So I think they did a phenomenal job. Again, this has not been shared with anybody besides you guys are the first people outside of the 25 people that sit on that committee that have seen this. I'm not even sure I was supposed to share it, but I'm doing it anyways. But I think it's hugely valuable. And it talks a little bit about standardization and consistency in terms of terms and who we are and what they do and how we do it. I think it's some pretty cool stuff. Again, it's 50 some odd pages, and there's a lot of information in here. And we're using this for internally amongst the 25 of us to make sure that we're all singing from the same hymnal, as well as we add people to the group. This is a tool that we're going to use so that they understand and they come in at the same playing field and level that the rest of us are. So we're all, again, trying to get to where the OEMs are. I hate to say that because it makes it feel like we're not, but we're not, from different perspectives. Well, I guess I'll rip through it real quick. But you can see, we literally went through and put together a laundry list in terms of what we're doing. I think they did a phenomenal job putting this thing together. It's a great tool that really, as crazy as it sounds, this might be something you could use in teaching, with students in class and defining what the difference is and the way it goes and what it is. They did a really great job with this. This could be an all-day class, so obviously I can't go through it all.
Dave.
Yeah.
This is you're sharing this with MD Expo to put on our website afterwards, right?
I believe so. Let me just validate. I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Okay.
Sam, the one that created it, and I'll ask you, were you guys on the call the other day, Thursday? Were you on the call Thursday? So I know that Sam talked about, she was concerned that it might get misinterpreted or misrepresented. So let me just validate it, but I'm pretty sure we are. I think we should. I don't think there's any harm in it, but I'll validate that for sure. I don't think she had a problem with it, but, she basically said, look, we built it for the internal. So I don't think there's any problem, but I'll double check it. So then the only other one I wanna show you is, so in addition to, there's another group, Dave Ambari, he and his team put together a training tool. And what they did was, again, what we're trying to do is combat the OEM's perspective that says, we're just a bunch of bumbling idiots. Come up with a training document that you would have at your disposal to start looking at ways to be consistent in terms of how you would go about training your people. And making sure that we would take away the fight that the OEMs have in terms of, well, they didn't get trained properly. When you take a document like this and you put it out for public comment, and you allow any and everyone to comment on it, and you take that feedback, and you do something with that feedback, either disregard it, or actually make changes to this, you've now validated your process. Does that make sense? So so when the FDA came out, and they asked people to comment on their February 2016 document, and they had thousands of people respond, and then they took all that feedback and they changed the way they did things and the way they looked at things, it now gives them credence and validity to the direction and what they're trying to do. Well, we want to do the same thing at this point, because what's happening is, as I described for you earlier, the OEMs pulled themselves out of the process, right? They're like, this is BS, it's not worth being part of, we're gonna pull ourselves out of the process. And then, now what's gonna happen is, we're gonna create all this stuff, and the OEMs are gonna come back, well, we didn't participate, we didn't have input, we don't agree with what they're doing. So, what we're hoping to do is take that arrow out of their bag, because we're gonna put this out here for public comment. We're gonna put this document out, and we're gonna ask all of you, as well as OEMs, and anybody else that cares to comment on it and give feedback, so that we can then go back and say, well, what do you mean they didn't have input? I guess that was their choice, because we put it out there, we asked them for feedback, so we're gonna win in this Dave's opinion, let's be really clear about this. We're gonna win either way, because they're either gonna give us feedback that we can then comment and make adjustments or do something with accordingly, or they're not gonna give us feedback, in which case we can say, they chose not to. So we can make the assumption that they were okay with what we put out. We can make any assumption we want. You know what they say about assumptions. So anyways, that's where we're at, and there's a possibility that we're also gonna put out the white paper, that the PowerPoint that I just showed a couple minutes ago. So, yes, sir.
Well, thank you again. I don't know how many times you've done this, 5 or 6. I think it's probably safe to assume we should probably pick this back up in Las Vegas for a fall show, just to give more update. And then I was asking the group and you, Dave, is there anything we can do on our end from our reach and our mediums to help this cause at a greater scale via a webinar, if we were to do this and get the entire country online and communicating? And understood that we're happy to do that, that's what we do, and just tell us what to do, we can make it happen.
So the short answer is yes. And so one of the things that's happening is, I have been pushing, and this is just something that's kind of got me a little bit wound up. I've been pushing for over a year with this group to say, so some of you do or some of you don't. The OEMs have been putting articles out. They put a video out just recently. They put some articles. How many people saw the video and the articles, right? Oh, wasn't that just a beautiful piece of work? Piece of crap. But in any event, they have been putting stuff out there, and people are seeing it. Not necessarily us, which should be, you should see it, but Congress is seeing it. People, the constituents, patients are seeing this stuff, and it's causing problems. So the answer, John, as far as I'm concerned, is we're trying to formulate, as a matter of fact, my man back here, whether he knows it or not, has been assigned, or he has agreed, and we're allowing and thanking him and begging him. He's actually going to chair a subcommittee around communication. And so what we're going to do, and you would be a paramount perspective in that, is as we publish probably quarterly updates as to what we're doing, it would be great to get an article that would come out in TechNation or wherever else that shows where we're at and what's going on. So that's going to become an official thing as Chris kicks that off. That just came out Thursday this week.
Yeah, Trish and I.
Right. So the answer is yes.
Chris, make sure you get with that John Wallace, not this John.
Yes.
Make sure that happens. Great.
Yeah, so what I would ask is, what I really want all of you to do is, you got to do what works for you. I'm not here to tell you what to do or how to do it. I am here primarily, if nothing else, I hope for the last 60 minutes, you learned something that you didn't know before. In candor, I hope the hell it makes you mad as hell. I hope it's got something in the pit of your stomach that's going to light a fire, and you're going to go do something. I don't know what that is. You have to decide what works for you. I'm here if you wanna have a conversation. Those two guys will make themselves available. I'll get you in touch with the other 23 people if that's what you want. But the reality of it is, you need to know what's going on, you need to get involved. And with the shortage of the FTEs that we have, putting more regulation on us, asking more of us, is gonna make it to the point where, even if they don't win in the popularity vote in terms of Congress and others saying that we're gonna be forced to go to different levels of regulation, they're gonna win just because of the new restrictions that they're gonna put on us, their ability to not support us in terms of parts and training. They're gonna win anyways, because we're not gonna be able to do the job. And that's not a good position to be in. And none of us want that. I know I don't ever wanna create a situation that's not absolutely high levels. The whole reason I do this, I mean, John asked me to do it the first time.
Knowing where all of the colleges and schools are, where biomed is being taught, and start there with the next generation that's coming out. Make sure that they're knowledgeable. Make this part of, don't do that, Chris. Make this part of things that they learn in their curriculum. I know as an instructor, as a teacher, I put things like this to my students to say, read this, and then I'm going to quiz you on it, explain it to me, because as they go out there in the industry, they're going to talk about it, disseminate it, and share. They're going to get on social media with it, and as they are coming up in the field, it's going to be talked about more and more. So if we know that the schools exist, we know that the programs are out there, let's disseminate this information and have that talk with them, and as they're coming out, it'll just keep resonating and growing. But then, it's about having that registry where all of them can go somewhere and sign up to be a part of this. Let's start there at the schools. All of those incoming students are right there. Let them sign up, and it'll get bigger and bigger as they get up and go out.
So, perfect, yes, and so that's an example how somebody can make an impact and make a difference. By the way, why you said that, I don't know where it is just yet, right? So Samantha created LinkedIn. Everybody's LinkedIn. Please tell me you're LinkedIn, because if you're not, you need to be. Get LinkedIn. Samantha created a MDSC LinkedIn. And right now, her and I are the only two on it. I think we're asking, go join it, because we're gonna post stuff to that. Our group would be posting stuff to that all the time. So I don't know where it's at just yet. You might not be able to join it just yet, but be looking for it. MDSC on LinkedIn. She's created a group. I know she's working. She's not a LinkedIn perfect person either, because as we called it the other day, we found out that she created it, but it was only going to be able to go to the people that we had. We're trying to figure out a way to get it to everybody. So look for it, sign up for it, and then you'll be getting updates. So I think that would be phenomenal. And we'll get John and his group to support that and advocate as well.
Absolutely, and then there's some of the younger folks at Better Biomed on a YouTube channel. Visit Justin on Better Biomed. I'm going to work with Justin. There's another social media website that Justin's going to be using. I'll work with Justin on getting communication out on that based upon our MDSC call the other day. Chris and I are going to start getting the word out, more importantly to the younger generation.
Yeah, is that the one? Because I joined one on Facebook that there's something every day on Biomed.
No, Biomeds, there's something on Facebook that typically doesn't, that reaches 30 and older or 40 and older.
Well, and any other questions, thoughts, comments? All right, all I can say is thank you for your time. Thank you for investing in yourself.